In the spring of 2026, the public was told that artificial intelligence had learned to hack. The implication was clear. Something fundamental had changed. Machines had crossed a dangerous threshold. Existing cybersecurity assumptions were obsolete, and governments now needed extraordinary new powers to control advanced AI. There was only one problem. AI could already hack. More than a year earlier, in March 2025, Anthropic entered Claude into a hack-the-box, capture-the-flag against human teams. Claude solved 17 of 20 challenges in roughly 25 minutes, remaining competitive with some of the fastest human participants. The world did not end. Cybersecurity did not suddenly become impossible. There were no emergency calls to shut down model development. The more revealing detail was that virtually every human team was also using AI tools. The distinction between human hacking and machine hacking had already blurred. Humans were using AI to accelerate their work, just as they had previously adopted vulnerability scanners, automated exploitation frameworks, password cracking tools, search engines, and open source intelligence platforms. AI did not suddenly invent automated hacking. It entered a field that had been automated for decades. Dramatic demonstrations of AI capability are increasingly being used to justify sweeping controls over who may build, modify, or distribute powerful models. A model hacks a system, generates dangerous technical information, manipulates another agent, or behaves unexpectedly. The demonstration is presented not simply as evidence of risk, but as evidence that extraordinary government intervention is now unavoidable. The public is told that the technology is uniquely dangerous, that ordinary risk management approaches are no longer sufficient, and that only a small number of heavily regulated institutions can be trusted to control it. Conveniently, those institutions are often the same large companies already dominating the market. Russ Roberts from Econ Talk taught me years ago that there's an important difference between being pro-market and being pro-business. A pro-market position favors competition, experimentation, entry, and decentralized discovery. A pro-business position favors the interests of the companies that happen to be dominant today. Those positions sometimes overlap. But when large companies ask governments to impose rules that their smaller competitors cannot afford to follow, the distinction becomes impossible to ignore. AI regulation could become one of the clearest examples of this dynamic. The leading frontier model companies benefited from decades of public research. Government-supported semiconductor development, publicly funded universities, defense investment, and infrastructure built under favorable policy regimes. Now some of those same companies warn that their technology is so dangerous that governments must restrict who else can develop or distribute it. A de facto ban on open-weight models would not merely address hypothetical safety risks, it would also protect incumbent firms from one of the greatest sources of future competition. That should make us skeptical, particularly when the technical case for containment is so weak. Even if we accept the most aggressive claims about AI hacking, a real-world cyber attack is rarely the product of one person or one agent sitting at a terminal typing a magical prompt. Serious attacks involve a chain of interdependent steps. An attacker needs access. They need reconnaissance, credentials, infrastructure, target selection, privilege escalation, persistence, and an understanding of the operational environment. They may need to evade detection, move across networks, interpret incomplete information, and determine which systems are valuable enough to attack. AI can accelerate nearly every link in that chain. That is significant. It can reduce the time needed to find vulnerabilities, automate portions of the exploit development, and allow less experienced hackers to perform more sophisticated work. But accelerating a chain is not the same thing as collapsing the entire chain into a single prompt. What we are watching is not a sudden quantum leap. It is the continuation of a long trend toward AI-assisted vulnerability discovery, faster exploit reasoning, and more automated attack tools. The mythology surrounding each new demonstration often serves a political purpose. It creates a sense of discontinuity. It suggests that everything has changed overnight, and that existing legal principles, civil liberties, and competitive markets must therefore be suspended. But before accepting that conclusion, we should ask a more basic question. Can the proliferation of powerful AI capabilities actually be stopped? One useful way to think about a large language model is as an extremely lossy form of data. A model does not contain an ordinary database of everything it has seen. Instead, it contains patterns that allow information and capabilities to be reconstructed probabilistically. That makes the object regulators would need to control extraordinarily difficult to define. What exactly is the dangerous thing? Is it a particular architecture, a set of model weights, a benchmark score, a data set, a scientific paper, an embedding, fine-tuning, system prompt, phrase that allows a model to retrieve a particular piece of information? A bad actor may not need access to a complete frontier model. They might need only a smaller model trained on information relevant to a specific object. At the trivial limit, the prohibited capability could be encoded in a single paper, a specialized database, a compact adapter, or even a carefully structured phrase. The regulated object approaches zero in size. Even full frontier models are not physically large in the way that uranium enrichment facilities, missile systems, or biological laboratories are large. They may occupy hundreds of gigabytes, but that is still small enough to mirror, compress, encrypt, torrent, conceal, and transmit through ordinary internet infrastructure. A person could carry the weights for a powerful model in a purse. Governments do have experience restricting the distribution of digital information. Pirating films is illegal, and copyright enforcement persuades enough people to use legitimate services that the legal market continues to function. But that system is resilient to widespread failure. Millions of people can pirate films, and the entertainment industry still survives, provided enough customers continue to pay. The proposed AI control regime faces a completely different standard. Its advocates often argue that a single uncontrolled model could produce a catastrophic outcome. If that is true, enforcement cannot merely reduce the rate of proliferation. It must approach perfect containment. It must control every copy, every derivative, every fine-tune, every compressed version, and every hidden transmission across every relevant jurisdiction. That would require the inspectability of nearly all digital media. It would require unprecedented visibility into global network traffic, severe restrictions on encryption, and some form of worldwide enforcement mechanism. These measures would be both horrifically intrusive and practically impossible. The problem becomes even harder when we consider how AI systems behave. First, there's jailbreaking. Cybersecurity has long operated under the assumption that any sufficiently complex program will contain vulnerabilities. LLM guardrails should not be treated differently. Additional safety investment may make a model harder to break, but the returns diminish. No sufficiently complex system is invulnerable. Users can bypass controls through adversarial prompts, divide requests across multiple terms, encode instructions indirectly, or fine-tune models with alternative system prompts. Some techniques are sophisticated. Others are embarrassingly simple. The supposedly catastrophic information is often already latent within leading models. It is also present in papers, repositories, forums, databases, textbooks, and other models. Once information exists in the wild, it will be incorporated into future training data. The information is not eliminated. It is merely waiting to be prompted out. Then there is agentic autonomy. Agents can already use tools, conduct searches, write and execute code, and adapt their strategies when an initial approach fails. They can potentially route around controls using VPNs, Tor, alternative providers, compromised accounts, or distributed info. They can also run high-volume experiments at a speed no human team could match. Because model weights can be transferred as files, an agent does not need continuous access to a prohibited system. It may need only a brief connection to acquire a model, dataset, adapter, or capability that can then be used offline. This leaves us with an uncomfortable reality. Some form of AI-enabled catastrophe may eventually occur. A catastrophe has always been possible. The world is dangerous, and technological progress produces both benefits and harms. Industrialization created factory accidents and mechanized warfare, but it also produced modern prosperity. Aviation created plane crashes, but banning flight was not a serious answer. The internet created cybercrime, propaganda, and mass surveillance, while also transforming access to knowledge and economic opportunity. The relevant question is not whether a technology can cause harm. Every powerful technology can. The question is how to manage that harm without destroying the benefits that make the technology valuable. As I see it, two broad paths are on the table. First is to attempt to constrain AI through comprehensive controls. In practice, this would likely mean restrictions on open weight models, compute licensing, identity requirements, surveillance of digital infrastructure, and government approval for certain forms of research or distribution. This approach would slow technological progress, undermine privacy, and concentrate power in a small group of governments and incumbent companies. It would also fail to achieve its stated goal because the underlying information would continue to spread. Second path is to remain broadly permissive while applying targeted mitigations derived from reliability engineering, cybersecurity, and risk management. That is where my own research is focused. Rather than pretending we can eliminate dangerous knowledge, we should build systems that make failure less likely, limit their consequences, and improve our ability to detect and respond to misuse. We should secure critical infrastructure, reduce unnecessary access, improve network segmentation, monitor anomalous behavior, protect proprietary and classified information, and design organizations so that the failure of one control does not produce catastrophe. Reliability engineering begins with recognition that perfect systems do not exist. Safety comes from layered defenses, redundancy, containment, graceful degradation, and recovery, not from declaring that dangerous knowledge must never spread. Advocates of stricter AI controls frequently gesture toward a middle ground of supposedly limited or low impact restrictions, but those proposals are rarely explained with enough precision. What capability would be controlled? How would the restriction be enforced? How would it prevent proliferation? How would it avoid becoming a barrier to entry? What surveillance infrastructure would be required? And what happens when the prohibited capability appears in a smaller model, a foreign jurisdiction, or an encrypted file? Until those questions are answered, vague calls for restraint should not be mistaken for a coherent policy. The pro-market response to AI is not to guarantee that today's leading companies remain the permanent custodians of advanced intelligence. It is to preserve competition, experimentation, open inquiry, and individual agency while developing practical defenses against specific harms. AI will create real dangers, but fear of those dangers should not become an excuse to build a surveillance state, freeze the market, or place one of the most technologies in history under the permanent control of a few incumbent institutions. The challenge is not to stop intelligence from spreading. It is to build a society resilient enough to live with it.